prayers, anonymous prayer requests that you have that you want to put in the ice cream box. Just put them in there, and I don't have to know who they are. God knows who they are. So we did that at the combined meal and had several that I've prayed over this summer. So, okay, Genesis chapter 29. As I said last week, welcome back, and for those especially who are watching online, welcome back to our continued study through the book of Genesis. And I always think of this, you probably get tired of me telling this story, but many times, even in another type of group setting, when I'm teaching chapter by chapter, and we finish one chapter and we come back the next week, or in this case, we come back, 4 months later, it's like how the old TV programs or the radio serials or the movie serials, you get a chapter every week and they'd always catch you up and they would always leave you with a cliffhanger. Little Nell would be tied to the railroad track and the evil Bart would have the hero tied to a chair in the old shack and the dynamite's lit. But what really hit me as I was thinking about that, anybody remember Rocky and Bullwinkle?
Yes.
Jude and Max have watched Rocky and Bullwinkle over and over and over this summer. And they always end one episode like that. What will they do when they come back? So that just was funny. But that's where we are. When we left Jacob, he and Rebekah had just pulled off the deception of making Isaac think that Jacob was Esau. They tricked Isaac into giving Jacob the patriarchal blessing, which, by the way, this is so convoluted. God had already decreed that patriarchal blessing was to go to Jacob anyway. But yet, they felt like they had to deceive Isaac in order to do it. And I was thinking about it, and I thought, it's complicated. It's very complicated. But Esau, as you remember, upon finding out what happened, vowed to kill Jacob. Rebekah heard about it. And so she insisted that Jacob leave there and go to her brother Laban in Haran for, as verse 44 of chapter 27 puts it, for a few days until your brother's fury subsides. And so then that brings us to chapter 28 that we covered back at the end of April. Actually, verse 46 of chapter 27 goes with chapter 28, if we need that in order to lead over. And it gives us that plausible reason for Jacob to leave Canaan. So Rebekah goes to Isaac, verse 46 of chapter 27, and Rebekah said to Isaac, I am sick and tired. Well, you're probably doesn't say sick, but I'm sure it was there. I'm sick and tired of living because of these daughters of Heth. That would be the daughters that Esau had married. And you can see her. If Jacob takes a wife from the daughters of Heth like these, I'll just die. What good will my life be? And so then that leads us into chapter 28. So Isaac brings in Jacob and gives him finally the real patriarchal blessing. So Isaac called Jacob and blessed him and charged him and said to him, you shall not take a wife from the daughters of Canaan. And so that gives him the excuse to go to Haran. So from verse 1 on through verse 5 of chapter 28, Isaac then gives the covenantal patriarchal blessing and sends him on to what's referred to as Padan Aram, which we know as Haran. So on his way, chapter 28, Jacob comes to this place that he will name Bethel, which means house of God. Beth is house, and El, of course, is God, Bethel. And that's where he has that dream. The angels, going up and down the ladder, or actually staircase is a better description. And it is in chapter 28 that God himself, in verses 13 through 15, God gives Jacob the covenantal blessing. And then Jacob makes a vow to God in verses 19 through 22, and that brings us up to where we begin today with chapter 29. And coming into chapter 29, if you don't know anything else about this chapter, you know that Jacob was tricked into marrying Leah. This is one of those chapters that I call claim to fame. If you don't know anything else, you know that story. I forget what I said to Joe a while ago. I was telling him about what we were going, and then I said, where Jacob gets his comeuppance, or did he? We'll see. But anytime you hear that story, you also then usually get a sermon or a lesson about, as you sow, so shall you reap. Jacob tricked his father, and now his father-in-law tricked him. Cut and dried. What else are you going to say about this chapter? Well, guess what? I've got more to say about this chapter. So, but there's more to it. And really, I mean, honestly, as I was trying to write your lessons, what am I going to say about this? I mean, this is just history. This just happened. I mean, what else can we really learn about that? But I have just been so amazed at what I've learned about this week. But before we dig into chapter 29, we first have to examine ourselves as we come to this. Just how do we come to this chapter? What do we think, really, about Jacob? However you think about Jacob will color how you read these next chapters that we're going to be studying this fall. However you come to Jacob will determine how you understand everything else. And honestly, we've seen that all along in this study. That's what I've said from the very beginning. In fact, I looked back at what I wrote for chapter 28, and this is how I began chapter 28. I said, this is another one of those instances where we may have different opinions on the character's motives and actions, as we have with many of the characters in this history. But unless we are right there with that person, we can't always know with certainty what their demeanor is like or what motivates them. If you've been with us, at least from chapter 12 of this study, you may remember that we've talked a lot about how and why these characters did the things that they did. Why really did Abraham go to Egypt? Why really did he say about Sarah, she's my sister? What motivated him to do that? Was it arrogance? Was it fear? Was it the law of the land? Had they done that at other places? Remember, all of those were possibilities. What motivates somebody to do what they do? Why did Sarah take matters into her own hands and offer Hagar to Abraham? Was she trying to run things? Was she trying to go ahead of God? Or did she feel like they had exhausted everything and this is, this was the law of the land and maybe this was what God expected her to do? I know Kay didn't feel that way about it, but there you go. I don't think I ever convinced her that might be a possibility. Why did Jacob act the way he did? Remember, the commentaries were all over the place on that. Did he see that Esau despised? Well, it tells us Esau despised the birthright, but is that what Jacob saw in it? And he thought he was stepping in to rescue the birthright. What motivates somebody? Why did Rebekah take matters into her own hands and cause Jacob to deceive Isaac? Remember, Jacob was more concerned about getting caught than he was what he was about to do. I hope as we have studied these that you have seen that there may be a lot more to each one of these instances than meets the eye. But what really has surprised me as I've studied these differences is the way that the commentaries portray these individuals. We'll talk about these as we go along. But that's why it's very important to read. If you're going to read any commentary, don't just read one. Because you only get one. I often say, my study Bible is not that way, but if you have a study Bible, Sherry, I believe yours, you have the scripture at the top and then the commentary at the bottom. Just remember, only the top part is inspired. The bottom part was written by a human being. And human beings are motivated or are swayed. We call it baggage, but we always use that as a bad connotation, but baggage is just where you put your stuff. baggage is just what we all carry that's made up our whole lives. And it's our own lives and our own views that's what causes us to look at things differently. So don't just read one commentary. If you're going to read one, or you read at least two. Or if you're not going to read commentaries, if you don't have access to them, just as you read the scripture over, and I encourage you to read it over and over and over, as many times as you can during the week, because you begin to see things that you didn't see before. And I encourage you, as you read it, try to put yourself in that place and say, what would I do if I was in this position? J. Vernon McGee, whom I normally love, I love his commentaries. I've quoted him many times. Just a folksy kind of guy. If you've ever heard him, of course he's passed on now, but his stuff is still on the radio, and it's still you can listen to it online. You can read his commentaries, and I normally love him, but he despises Jacob. He has nothing good to say about Jacob. He's arrogant. He's lazy. He's devious. He can't find anything good to say about Jacob. Warren Wiersbe, on the other hand, gives Jacob the benefit of the doubt. And for me, as I've gotten to know these individuals in Scripture, the more I see that, and we've said it many times, they're just flawed individuals that God uses. And the more I've read these, the more I've studied them, the more I think that they thought they were doing the right thing. And some of them were really wrong, but why did they do that? Would I have done any different if I had been there? So that's why we need to see these people as real people and again, put ourselves in their place. This is not just history. This is human nature. Proverbs 16 verse 2 says, all the ways of a man are clean or pure or right in his own sight, but the Lord weighs the motives. As chapter 28 ends, Jacob makes this vow to God, and you may remember this from the last lesson. You may remember that I read this vow two ways. In fact, I had notes in my Bible that Jacob he's still making deals. He's trying to make a deal with God. Maybe, maybe not. It all depends on this little word that in my translation is translated as if, but that same word can be, that's in verse 20, that same word can be translated as since. It's the same word. What's your translation say there in verse 20? Does it say, then Jacob made a vow saying, if? Does anybody's have sense? But that
changes the whole meaning.
It does. It changes everything about it. When we read it by saying, if God will be with me and will keep me on this journey that I take, and if he will give me food to eat and garments to wear, and if I return to my father's house in safety, then the Lord will be my God. And when I come back, I'm going to give an offering. That's a deal if you ever heard one made. But if you read it this way, since God will be with me, because God just told him he would be earlier in that chapter, since God will be with me and will keep me on this journey that I take, and since he will give me the food to eat and garments to wear, and I return to my father's house in safety, and then the Lord will be my God.
But it doesn't even really work that way, because it's saying then the Lord will be.
You would say, and the Lord will be my God. You have to change the and, or the then to and.
If you started off saying, the Lord is my God, and then that flips it, and that's more relevant for if it was since.
Exactly. That fits with sense. So which one is it? Is he making a deal with God, or is he making a statement of faith? That's something you have to decide for yourself. Because believe me, when we studied that last time, I went through every resource I could find. I went through everything that talked about the tenses of the words, the exact words, what were they, trying to find something to give us a clue. It could be either way. So as I said, as chapter 28 ends, this happened. But why is that important? Why is it important how we read that? How we read that will color everything that we know about Jacob from here on. Is he sneaky and conniving, or is he making a change in his life? Is he honestly? I remember this years ago in being in a Sunday school class, and we were talking about Joseph, the coat of many colors, and which we will get to eventually someday. But Joseph, when he went out to see his brothers, you remember the brothers hated him when he told them that dream that he had. And I always have viewed Joseph as being like this nerdy guy that has no idea that what he's saying offends anybody. And the brothers, that's why they throw him in the pit and then sell him off, because they don't like what he said at all. And this friend of mine said, I think he was flaunting this dream. And I'm like, I just see him as this, you get the thick glasses on, the pocket protector, and he's just this guy, he has no clue that, hey, I had this cool dream. You won't believe what I dreamed. What you think about a person colors everything about how you view the rest of the story. The same is true with Jacob. So, any comments or questions, or how you feel about Jacob going into this? Are you willing to be open-minded about Jacob, I guess I should ask.
I'm willing to give him the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah, okay.
Because I think that this experience, I think it did change him.
Yeah, I think it did.
And thank God.
Yeah,
That's us right there.
Yeah. I mean, we could do the same thing. Yeah. All right, well, verse 1 then of chapter 29 reads, Then Jacob went on his journey and came to the land of the sons of the east. And anytime my Bible's got a notation, I always got to look and see, what it means or what it's saying. That phrase, went on his journey, is literally translated as lifted up his feet. And anybody else think of put your feet in the pike? That's what we were always told. Well, we got to put our feet in the pike. It's time to go. But that just reminded me of that. You never? Well, but you're not from around here.
No, she's from here.
You have to be from around here, I guess. That's one of the old sayings from around here. But at any rate, he got there. I mean, he leaves and we don't know anything about the trip. We don't know anything that happened on the way. The journey from Bethel, where he was in chapter 28, to Haran is around 500 miles. As we saw when we studied chapter 24, it could take him anywhere from 20 to 30 days or so, depending on how much ground he covered in a day. And we will see later in our study that he was indeed traveling light. He's not like Abraham's servant, who had this whole entourage of camels and servants and presents and goodies with him as he went. No, Jacob came to Haran alone. And when he arrived, there were several surprising things that happened. Now, we know that by the use of the word behold. Now, I know if you're using the NIV or New Living Translation, that word won't be in there. That's only in the New American Standard or the King James. But it's a word that denotes surprise. It adds, when we understand that that's there, it adds to our understanding of the event. It's like one of those little things that helps you understand the atmosphere and everything that's going on. Behold can mean, as you and I might put it, wow, look at that. Or surprise, or it literally means it just happened to happen. People all the time talk about, well, it just so happened that this turned up. No, Coincidence is when God works but prefers to remain anonymous. That's what I think about happenstance or coincidence. But this word, and I'll read it into the lesson when I read those verses. This word is used 4 times in the first 7 verses. So look at verse 2. And he looked, and behold, or he just happened to come to a well in the field. And behold, wow, it just happened that there were 3 flocks of sheep were lying there beside it, for from that well they watered the flocks. Now the stone on the mouth of the well was large. And we know that as Moses is writing this and as he is compiling this history, he gives us that information. So, first of all, as he's traveling, I was thinking about this last night after I went to bed, and I thought, what might be a good example? That he just happens to come to this well. Remember back in chapter 24, the servant, when he came to the well, prayed about the well. Well, Jacob doesn't pray about it. But what are the odds? You know, of course, God's in control that he come to this well. And I was thinking, okay, if you were going to come from Florida to Knoxville, think about the number of different ways you could come. Several different ways. And however you came would determine where in Knoxville city limits you arrived. Whether it's out here, whether it's Pellissippi Parkway coming in from Maryville 411, whether it's coming in from... What are the odds that he would arrive at this well? And so Moses tells us, behold, it just happened to happen. What a surprise that he came to this well. And this well is in a field. Now, this is actually more like a cistern than a well. Some of you may know what a cistern is. My grandmother had a cistern behind the house, and it had the rock on the top of it like that, and the pump. But this was just a cistern out in a field. He's nowhere near a city. But wow, look at that. There are shepherds and sheep lying out in the field. And we'll see in a minute, it's the middle of the day. What are they doing out there in the middle of the day? They should be out in their fields. The flocks should be out eating. Just randomly in a field. How about that? And wow, look, there are 3 different flocks of sheep lying around. And this is not the time of day for sheep to be lying down. As I said, they should be out in a field. So that's surprising to him. So then Moses, as I said, who is compiling this history, gives us the explanation in verse 3. And Moses said, when all the flocks were gathered there, then, and that was the expectation, there's going to be more come. These 3 are just there now. When all the flocks were gathered there, then they would roll the stone from the mouth of the well and water the sheep and put the stone back in its place on the mouth of the well. So there's your explanation. That's what the behold is all about. That's why they're there. And the thing of it is, as I was reading this and I was studying, I saw that the shepherds and flocks would gather at these wells or cisterns, and whoever got there first would be the first to get theirs watered. And I couldn't help but think about how cars line up at the schools to pick up the kids. Do you know how early they get there? Way early. But whoever gets to the well first gets watered first. And the commentaries differ on whether this well actually belonged to Laban and the others had to wait for Rachel to get there to get permission to take the stone off, or whether the stone was so large that, and apparently these were young men. These were not older adult shepherds or, fully grown men. They were young. And so any one or even 2 of them couldn't move that rock. They had to wait until they were all there, and they all collectively moved the rock. And then they all collectively put it back on. But at any rate, that they were all waiting. So the first thing Jacob has to determine is he at the right place? Because, as we said, coming into Knoxville, what part of Knoxville are you in? Is he at the right place? This is certainly not like the servant described the place that when he met Rebekah. I mean, you sure he's heard that story? No, he said that well was like this, and it was in the city, and this is where people came and got their drinking water. This is not where they watered the sheep. So this is not that, so am I at the right place? And again, Jacob didn't pray about it like the servant did. But he has to know if he's at the right place. And not only is he at the right place, but is Laban still alive? I mean, it's been almost 100 years since Rebekah left here. And Laban's her older brother. So, are we at the right place? And is Laban still alive? And so he asked the young men, verse 4, and Jacob said to them, my brothers, and this indicates that they're speaking the same language, my brothers, where are you from? And they said, we're from Haran. Wow! Behold. And he said to them, do you know Laban, the son of Nahor? And they said, we know him. Yeah. And he said to them, is it well with him? And they said, it is well. And behold, you're not going to believe this, but his daughter Rachel is coming with the sheep. We see her. She's at a distance. She's coming with the sheep. And so then, this is how Jacob responds to them. He said, behold, he said, look here. It's the middle of the day. It's not time for the livestock to be gathered. Water the sheep and go pasture them. Now, here is where it gets interesting, and we have the differences of opinions about Jacob and his motives. As I read in verse 7, he said, look, you shouldn't be laying around here. Some of the old movies, we're wasting daylight. You know, the old John Wayne movie. We're wasting daylight. So, you need to get these sheep watered, and you need to get back to work. And Rachel's coming. So it goes on, and while he was still speaking to them, Rachel came with her father's sheep, for she was a shepherdess, and it came about when Jacob saw Rachel, the daughter of Laban, his mother's brother, and the sheep of Laban, his mother's brother, that Jacob went up, rolled the stone from the mouth of the well, and watered the flock of Laban, his mother's brother. So, let's break that down. What really happened here? J. Vernon McGee says that Jacob came in there arrogantly and he's going to own everything, and it would have taken place like this. What do you mean laying around here? You get them sheep watered and you get out of here, because he wants to be alone with Rachel. He goes over and he says, you need this stone moved? I'll just move this stone and you can get them sheep watered and get out of here. That was the way J. Vernon McGee described this picture from his point of view. Wiersbe and many of the other commentaries take an entirely different view of the event. That Jacob, because he is older than these younger guys, and he chides them because they're laying around and not working like they should be out working. Because remember, Jacob was a shepherd. He was a herdsman. Esau was one who wanted to be out hunting somewhere all the time. But Jacob was a hard-working shepherd. And if he's hard-working, everybody else ought to be hard-working. So he chides them if they need to be laying around and just laying there in order to get there first. You need to get on with it. Wiersbe said that Jacob acted boldly, took matters into his own hands, and removed the stone from the well. So which is it? Bold, being the adult, or arrogant, being what you might think Jacob is? Is he being arrogant? Is he being bold?
I thought he was being bold.
I think he's being bold.
I think so too.
Can we take a vote? So he's being bold. If Kay was here, she would not believe that. I just know that. So, but here, think about this. How do we really know his motives? I mean, I looked, I checked tenses of verbs, I checked words. Is there any clue to his attitude? And there's not. It's either this or it's that. So how do we really know his motives? Think about it like this. If I'm describing somebody else, I might use the word arrogant. But if I'm describing me, which word am I going to use?
Oh.
Bold. I just took the bull by the horns and I just said, this is what we got to do. I'm not being arrogant, I'm just being bold.
Being a leader.
I'm being a leader. There you go. And it's, as the saying goes, sometimes you just got to be the boss.
And you would say that's the practical thing to do.
That's the practical thing to do. Exactly. So, and we've talked about this before. It's like, some person you may say they're a dedicated hard worker. Somebody else may call that same person a workaholic. Yeah. They may be somebody that's a get or done kind of person, or somebody else may say, well, they just want to run things. There's always two ways to look at it. Why did he move the stone? Did he want the young shepherds to go get on with their work, or did he want them out of the way whenever Rachel arrived?
Well, it could have been both. I mean, so often our motives are not all one way or all the other.
Yeah.
It's like a combination.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Was he also wanting to impress Rachel?
Yeah.
I thought
I believe that was a big part of it. I believe he at first, this is just my opinion, I believe at first he just got onto them because they're just laying around being lazy, wanting to be there first. But then as he sees Rachel coming, he doesn't want anybody else around. But he doesn't get it done quick enough because they are still there when Rachel arrives, because we don't see him watering them first or watering their sheep first. Rachel gets there. But anyway, he removes the stone. And we may have thought of him before as a weak mama's boy. I mean, that's kind of how we talked about him in some of our other lessons, but he wasn't. And before the others could come, he removes the large stone and watered Rachel's flocks. You remember Rebekah watered the servants' camels and the servant himself. But now Jacob waters Rachel's flocks. Maybe he wanted to impress her. Maybe it was love at first sight. We don't know, but notice the progression in verses 10 through 12. And it came about when Jacob saw Rachel, the daughter of Laban, his mother's brother, and the sheep of Laban. And some would say that's what really motivated him. He saw this nice looking sheep and he wanted in on that. We don't know. But he saw the sheep of Laban, his mother's brother, that Jacob went up and rolled. This is the progression. First, he rolled the stone from the mouth of the well. Then he watered the flock of Laban, his mother's brother. Then Jacob kissed Rachel. And then lifted up his voice and wept. And then, of course, then is not in here. I'm adding that. And then Jacob told Rachel that he was a relative, or your translation may say brother. That word is used as a relative. He was a relative of her father, and that he was Rebekah's son. And then look what she did. She ran and told her father. It's likely, I mean, this kiss, of course, is not a passionate type kiss. It's a family type kiss. But a man, she doesn't think about it. She doesn't know who this man is. This man takes the stone off. This man waters her flock. Then, he saw all this. Then she still doesn't know who he is. He kisses her, basically, kisses her on the cheek, and then he starts crying.
She don't know what is wrong with you.
Yeah, what is up with that? And then Jacob told her who he was, and then she ran off. Think about what's going through her mind. It's likely that Rachel had heard the story of Rebekah her whole life. I mean, we don't know how old she is here, but however old she is here, she had to have been a teenager at some point. And she heard those stories and how romantic those stories were. Maybe as a young girl, maybe she fantasized about something that romantic happening to her someday. And then now, Jacob is here. And so she ran to get her father, leaving the sheep behind. Yeah. Sounds like a nursery rhyme. And again, it matters what we think about Jacob. One commentary said, Jacob kissed Rachel and wept, thinking of himself. Oh, I've made it here, I've got it to, it's all about him. This commentary said this, and it wasn't J. Vernon McGee, it was another one. The servant praised God, thinking about God, but Jacob thought about himself. Maybe he was just so filled with emotion of finally getting there. We just don't know. Again, what you think about him will determine how you think he's reacting. So then, verse 13. So when it came about, when Laban heard the news of Jacob, his sister's son, and he ran to meet him and embraced him and kissed him and brought him to his house. And then it says, and then he, Jacob, related to Laban all these things. Now, what do you think about Laban? What did Laban remember about when the servant came? What did the servant bring with him when he came?
Good stuff.
Good stuff. Maybe this is how I see Laban. He ran out there to say, okay, what's he got? He didn't have anything. The servant had lots of gifts. Maybe Laban was looking around. You got anybody with you? Kind of thing. But then it says that Jacob related to Laban all these things. And I want to know how much of what had happened did he relate to Laban. Did he tell him everything? Did he tell him about the soup and stealing the birthright? Did he tell him about the deception? I don't know.
Probably not.
I just can't see him telling him all of that.
Would that news have traveled or not?
I don't think so. Again, we're 500 miles away, and I really don't think so. I think, this is what, in my opinion, I think since Laban was a blood relative, it's like, how's your mom and them,
Yeah.
Is your mother still living, your dad, Abraham, no, he's passed on by now. Yeah, I think it was more of a how's everybody doing kind of thing that he related to him. Verses 14 and 15, Laban said to Jacob, surely you are my bone and my flesh. And it says that Jacob stayed with him a month. Then, verse 15, Laban said to Jacob, because you are my brother or you are my relative, should you therefore serve me for nothing? Tell me, what shall your wages be? And here again, the commentaries differ. McGee said Jacob was a freeloader, and basically Laban said, look, if you're going to stay here, you're going to have to work. Wiersbe and many others said that Jacob, being a shepherd, set right into work. And Laban, seeing what a good worker he was, wanted to keep him. And then even yet another commentary said that Laban put him to work right away. Oh, you've moved that stone and hey, I've got a place for you. We really don't know which one of these it is. It all depends on what we think about Jacob.
Well, it says here, should you therefore serve me for nothing?
Yeah. So does that mean he wasn't working, or does that mean he'd been working without any wages?
I take it as he was working without any wages.
That's always the way I've taken it, and never thought of it the other way until I read that in McGee's commentary.
I'm wondering how he explained that he had left home and wasn't in any hurry to go back.
Yeah, and didn't have anything with him but a staff, which we'll find out later.
So it wasn't just like a friendly dropping in.
That's on the way, I don't know. He related to him everything. I don't know how much of it he did. My personal opinion is he didn't tell him all the gory details.
So he was there for a month, and at this point, Laban's saying, well, he hasn't left yet, so he's going to stick around.
Yeah, I'm not going to have you work for me for nothing, so just name your wages. So now, what do we think about Laban? Several translations say that, we already discussed this, but say that Jacob stayed with him a month. King James Version says he abode with him, and the word simply means to dwell. So we don't know what he was doing. And again, as we said, we think he was working. But then, after Laban asked the question, tell me what shall your wages be? And Moses fills in some of the details of the family in verses 16 and 17. We didn't know, well, we knew about Rachel, but that's all we knew if we make ourselves read this like we don't know the story. Verses 16 and 17, now Laban had 2 daughters. The name of the older was Leah, and the name of the younger was Rachel. And Leah's eyes were, my translation says weak. You may have a different word.
Delicate?
Huh?
Delicate?
Delicate, that's, that's
Mine says ordinary.
ordinary. That's a good word. Leah's eyes were weak or ordinary or delicate, but Rachel was beautiful of form and face. Now, the fact that Leah's eyes were weak, the King James Version says her eyes were weak. Well, no, that's the New American Standard says her eyes were weak. The King James Version says she was tender-eyed. NIV says delicate. But that really doesn't tell us anything. We're not exactly sure what this means, but it doesn't, as I've heard it said, doesn't mean she's ugly. There's just something about her eyes. What we have to know, again, about is the culture. The people of that culture, even today, put great emphasis on beautiful eyes. Leah's eyes were simply plain. Now, my eyes are hazel in color, but the color of them depends on what I'm wearing at the moment. They can be more bluish, they can be more greenish. I mean, you might say my eyes would be plain or weak in that case. My mother's eyes, on the other hand, as well as all of our grandsons, were brilliantly blue. Just bright blue. Yesterday, I noticed this sitting at the table in our living room, kitchens, everything's open together. Joined the TV on football yesterday, and Terry Bradshaw's eyes are the most brilliantly blue of anybody's eyes I have ever seen.
Contacts.
Well, that may be what it is, but I mean, they sparkled. Although we had a pastor once whose eyes would sparkle like that when he was really getting going into a story, but brilliantly blue. But Moses chose to emphasize that fact, probably because that's how Jacob described her, and that description was what was handed down through the history. But again, it doesn't mean she was cross-eyed and ugly, so don't let anybody tell you that. So then, verses 18 through 20. Now, Jacob loved Rachel. Moses tells us that. We know that, but we didn't know it until now, if we were not making ourselves not know the rest of the story. Now, Jacob loved Rachel, so he said, now notice this detail. I will serve you 7 years for your younger daughter, Rachel. He emphasizes that, the younger daughter. Now again, we need to look at motives. Moses tells us that Jacob loved Rachel. We knew that. But did that make Jacob oblivious to Laban's motives?
I think so.
Yeah.
Was he, starry-eyed? And he was so in love with her, he didn't see anything else. We've seen that.
Was it typical during those times for the older daughter to be married first?
That's what Laban will say.
But
Is that true?
But I didn't find that anywhere.
Yeah.
So, but
That's he just saying it.
that's his excuse, and he's standing by it,
Yeah.
kind of thing. But at any rate, Jacob specifically says your younger daughter. As we said, did that make him oblivious to Laban's motives, or did he simply trust Laban?
Maybe both.
Maybe both. Or did he know Laban well enough to know that Laban wouldn't turn down free labor for 7 years? It may be a little bit of the both. Who thought who was getting the upper hand in this deal? We don't know. And then what's the deal with Laban's reply? That just bumfuzzled me. He said, well, okay, it's better that I give her to you than I should give her to any other man.
I know.
Well, would be.
Keep it in the family?
Yeah, keep it in the family. I'm like, was Laban trying not to tip his hand? Or, Was he being trying to show? Was he trying to be non-committal to bring him in?
Well, we know he was dishonest.
Yeah, we know. We do know he's dishonest.
Do you think at this point that thought had come into his mind that how he could maybe get another 7 years out of it, or had that not occurred?
That may very well be it. What I've got here is, was it not? Did he say it that way? Was it to not tip his hand, or was he genuinely unconcerned? I think it was to not tip his hand. But Alfred Edersheim said that after Jacob had been there a month, this month that he was there, Laban began to see how Jacob could be valuable to him and could get him free for 7 years. And maybe he had both honest and selfish motives. With Jacob's love for Rachel, he knew Jacob was not going to haggle over a price. Jacob's going to offer over the top because he's head over heels in love with her. Laban may have thought he's going to make this over the top offer, and he did. But there again, as we've just been saying, what about that custom, if it really was a custom, but what about that custom that the older needed to marry first? Was Laban already concocting this plan? Or was Laban thinking, surely to goodness we can find her a husband in 7 years before this comes up, So he just didn't mention it. It's not relevant at this point. But then 7 years passed. And we all know that Jacob's been counting the days. Verse 21, then Jacob said to Laban, give me my wife, for my time is completed, that I may go into her. And Laban's like, oh, gee, it's been 7 years already? Wow, time flies. But I suspect he's been calculating all along what to do about Leah. But there again, was he really concerned about Leah, or was he trying to figure out how to get 7 more years of free labor?
I think that he felt sorry for Leah that she didn't have anybody.
I hope you're right. But I think he was concocting this idea.
And it could have been both. So often.
This is the only way I'm going to get rid of her. So, yeah.
I just felt sorry for Leah.
Hold that thought. We're going to talk about a little bit more about that in a minute.
No, was she in on this?
Hold that thought. But whatever it is, it appears that Laban is keeping his end of the bargain. Verses 22 through 24. Laban gathered all the men of the place and he made a big feast. Now, it came about in the evening that he took his daughter Leah and brought her to Jacob, and Jacob went into her. And then Moses tells us that Laban also gave his maid Zilpah to his daughter Leah as a maid, as her maid. So here's the part of the story we all know or think we do. Jacob said, give me my wife. And Laban did. It just wasn't the wife that Jacob was expecting. Jacob didn't say, give me Rachel. That's a point that always struck me about that. He said, give me my wife. And he says, okay, I'll give you your wife. This one's going to be your wife. But it just wasn't the wife that Jacob expected. And then verse 25. And you just can't imagine. It came about in the morning that, behold, what a surprise!
In all capital letters.
In all capital letters. It was, I'm thinking, at the crack of dawn. When it was just barely daylight.
And he went, oh.
Oh, no. What has happened? Yeah, we don't know what he said to her. We don't know if he said anything to her. But imagine that conversation. Where did you come from? What are you doing here? And imagine her, please, it was my father's fault.
But she had to go along with it.
What do you think the conversation was between Laban and Leah?
And Leah, yeah.
Was she okay, Dad, I'll do that.
Oh, yeah.
Or was she,
Please don't make me.
okay?
Please don't make me. You're right. He's the patriarch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She's not going to go against him.
No, she can't, no matter what she really felt, whether she was secretly glad because she secretly loved
Yes.
Jacob or not. It didn't matter. She could not go against what he said.
But she knew for the last 7 years that he was working to marry
Her sister.
Her sister.
And had watched that relationship develop over 7 years. We don't know how, did he tell her that the day before? Or did he tell her that, a year before? We don't know. There's just so many things about this that we don't know that we wish we did. What really was going on in their hearts. But the rest of verse 25, and Jacob goes immediately to Laban and says, "What is this you have done to me? Was it not for Rachel that I served you? Why then have you deceived me?" We see that word hanging in the air. Now, whether or not he did, whether or not he saw it, whether or not he realized it or remembered it, we see that word hanging in the air. And the deceiver was deceived.
And I've got betrayed.
Betrayed.
Deceived and betrayed.
Yeah.
And I was just wondering what the difference is.
Well, lied to, betrayed it's similar, I would think. But betrayed meaning deceived is the act of it. Betrayed is I trusted you.
Yeah.
One is the physical, one is the emotional reaction. And we might say, well, he deserved it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I have heard people say that about this chapter, about this verse. Galatians 6 verse 7, to paraphrase, says, "As you sow, so shall you reap." That's referred to as the law of the harvest. The law of the harvest is that you will reap what you sow, more than you sow, later than you sow. Charles Stanley, over and over and over.
He said that over and over.
Over and over and over. But it's been more than 7 years. And even if we think that event in Bethel changed Jacob, and if we read that vow as since God is going to be with me instead of a deal maker, if we think Jacob has changed, if we truly believe he has changed, then it's like, but yeah, he did that, but he's changed. It doesn't matter.
No.
It doesn't matter. Jacob now is in a whole new place. He's in a whole new life. He's whole new time of his life. But he's reaping what he sowed.
Oh, it's scriptures. Be sure your sin will
find you out. Exactly. Deception and distrust. This is not karma. The world is, what goes around comes around. This is recompense. God brings judgment in the same way that the sin happened. And we've talked about that a lot in these lessons. Whether it was Rebekah's fault of what Jacob did or not, the man who deceived his father was now deceived by his father-in-law. He had said that he was the older son when he was the younger son. And he was given the older sister when he expected the younger sister. His father's eyes were dim and could not see well, and he acted on expectations. The bridal chamber was dark, and she was veiled, and Jacob couldn't see. We don't know what went on. We don't know if there had been questions in the night and excuses given, just like he had given his father. But he too acted on expectations. He expected it to be Rachel, and it wasn't. Maybe Rachel and Leah were similar in size. Maybe their voices sounded similar. We don't know. But we know that she was veiled. But Jacob had goat hair on him to deceive his father. However it happened.
It's really interesting.
However it happened, it was Leah
It just seems
and not Rachel.
so much the same.
Yeah, so many things. But now, this is the part I want to know that's not in the scripture. Where was Rachel when all this was going on? Was she tied to a chair somewhere?
Like she could be running.
She was on the train tracks.
She was tied to the train tracks, right. That's where she was. Now the fuse of the dynamite's lit, literally. So, and, did they have to keep her away from the festivities?
Yeah.
Did Jacob not wonder, well, why is Leah not here at the party? Leah was there at the party. And how did Leah really feel about all of this? Was she all for it? Or was she as much a victim as Rachel was? What was going through her mind? But Laban, and he was cavalier about the whole matter, verses 26 and 27. I just picture this. Jacob comes rushing in here, barely clothed, and he, what have you done? Laban leans back in his chair and he lights his pipe and he says, well, it's not the practice in our place to marry off the younger before the firstborn. Did you just see that happening?
Sounds like my grandfather.
Yeah, well, son, this is the way it is. And then he goes on, because he knows this is what's going to happen. He's already got it figured out. Tell you what, complete the week of this one, Leah. And I didn't notice that before, the we. And we will give you the other also for the service which you shall serve with me for another 7 years. Tell you what we'll do. We'll give you the other, and then you just stay another 7 years. And he knows he knows he's going to do that. So
I couldn't believe it. It's in 1 week. He's going to have 2 weddings. I
yeah.
always kind of thought it was another 7 years and then another wedding.
No. He gets Rachel. I'll explain about this week. Now, let me throw this out. You might want to read this later. In chapter 31, we'll see this later. In chapter 31, verses 14 and 15, we'll see that Rachel and Leah both did have feelings about what had happened and how they were treated. They didn't like it.
I see them both as victims.
They were both victims.
Now,
They both suffered.
And neither one of them really could have done anything about it.
No, there wasn't a thing either one of them could do about it.
now, did they get married?
Yeah,
And is that what that party was?
that's what the party was. That's what
Okay.
this is how it works. There's something interesting about this week. Now, you need to know this. In that culture, the bride and groom didn't go off somewhere for a honeymoon. They spent the week being treated like royalty. Like if this happens, if they have this wedding on Sunday, they stay there the whole week and they're treated like royalty the whole week. They don't go off somewhere else. So they had to stay there. What Laban is saying, complete this week. Let's go through the normal festivities and activities that take place in this week. And at the end of this week, you can have Rachel too. They didn't get another week. It's just you get Rachel too and you work for me for seven more years. But now think about it. This would be Jacob and Leah. They spent a week being treated like royalty in front of everybody all week. Now, did anyone or did everyone know that Jacob was supposed to be married to Rachel?
Good question.
If everybody knew it was supposed to be Jacob and Rachel, if they didn't know, if they just knew he was marrying one of the daughters, they come to the wedding, it's going to be a wedding. He's marrying one of the daughters. We don't know which one. If not, then they could pull this week off, and no one would be the wiser. Just Jacob and Leah and Rachel and Laban would be, and probably the servants, but they'd be all that would know. Not the whole festivities, everybody that came to the wedding. But if everyone knew that the bride was supposed to be Rachel, what a horribly embarrassing week that would have been.
How could they not know that it? I mean,
Well, if it's all your relatives from out of town you've invited in, they may not know.
But he's been there for 7 years.
Right. I agree. At least everybody in the immediate family and all the servants and they do have brothers. We find that out later. All of these knew there was no mistaking that he was in love with Rachel. So think about what Jacob was having to go through that week.
and Rebecca.
Yeah.
Well, he
Rachel.
was having fun.
Do what?
He was having fun.
Maybe. Doing his duty. But the patriarch, Laban, was in control. They had no say. There was nothing Jacob could do about it. And verse 30 says, so Jacob, then at the end of the week, Jacob went in to Rachel also, and indeed he loved Rachel more than Leah. And he served with Laban for another 7 years. So at the end of the week, Jacob married Rachel. Probably no festivities this time. Laban got both daughters married off, and another 7 years of labor out of Jacob to boot. The rest of this chapter covers maybe 4 or 5 years because Leah had children back to back. And we see that even in recompense, God is involved. God had a plan for Leah. This is what you got to know about this. Just like Jacob was the one through whom God had chosen the covenant to go. Remember, Rebecca was told the older shall serve the younger. God had chosen Jacob before he was born, that the covenant was to go through him. In this case, God had chosen Leah to be the one through whom the Messiah would come, as well as the priestly line that came through Levi. Judah and Levi both came from Leah. It was God's plan that Leah would be the one. Well, then someone might say, well, then the deception turned out good. No. God was fully capable of making that happen, just like it was with Jacob and Esau. God was fully capable of making that happen without any help, without Jacob or anybody's help, without the deception. If only they had consulted the Lord and not ran ahead, like Sarah did, like we all do sometimes. We quoted from Proverbs 16 earlier in talking about God judging the motives of the heart. But verse 1 of Proverbs 16 says, the plans of the heart belong to man. In other words, we make all these plans. We make our to-do list. That's why I try so hard to say, Lord willing, before I say what we're going to do. But the plans of the heart belong to man, but the answer of the tongue is from the Lord. Or as I paraphrased it, man intends, but God superintends. God had ordained one man and one woman. So, does someone else's deception free us from keeping God's law? No.
Was it common to have 2 wives?
Yeah, it's all over the place. It was common, but that was not God's plan. If Jacob, or if Rebecca, as I think we've said this before, but if Jacob had a close relationship with God, he should have said, God ordained one man and one woman, and we'll just have to live with this. But he loved Rachel, and he agreed to that. The question arises about polygamy, as we just said. And I've heard people say, well, God was okay with it in the Old Testament because it was all over the place. No. God never agreed with it. God was never okay with it. He allowed it just as he allows people to commit other sins. But he never condoned it. And Jesus makes that clear in Matthew 19. But again, this is real history. And like we said at the beginning, these people are just flawed human beings. And Leah, as we see in the birth of her children, Leah is truly, and we'll see this as we go on, Leah, at least in the beginning, is more spiritual than Rachel is. Leah refers to God always, or at least in this beginning part, as the Lord, the covenant Yahweh. As we'll see next time in chapter 30, Rachel only refers to him as God, as Elohim, not the covenant Lord. And we know later that Rachel is the one who steals her father's household gods. But Leah is the one through whom the Messiah and the priestly line would come. But each of these children, each of these sons that Leah has reflects how she feels. So verse 30, let me back up. Jacob went into Rachel also, and indeed he loved Rachel more than Leah. Some translations will say Rachel he loved and Leah he hated. And it's not hate in terms of despising. It's just like we see in the New Testament when Jesus says, unless you hate father and mother. It's a hierarchy. It's a priority thing. Jacob didn't hate Leah, but he didn't love her as much as he did Rachel. And now verse 31, now the Lord saw that Leah was unloved, or not loved as much, and he, the Lord, opened her womb. Now we know that Jacob is having relations with both of them.
Yes.
We know that. But Leah's the one that he allows to have a child. He opened Leah's womb, but Rachel was barren. And Leah conceived and bore a son and named him Reuben, for she said, because the Lord has seen my affliction. She's been praying. This word for the word that's translated as Reuben is similar to the word affliction. So that's why she named him Reuben. The Lord has seen my affliction. Surely now my husband will love me. So then, verse 33, she conceived again and bore a son and said, because the Lord has heard. She's been praying. The Lord has heard that I am unloved. He therefore has given me this son also. So she named him Simeon, which is a word similar to unloved. Verse 34, and she conceived again and bore a son and said, now this time my husband will become attached to me because I have borne him 3 sons. Therefore, this son's name was Levi, which is similar to attached. And then finally, though, in verse 35, and she conceived again and bore a son and said, this time I will praise the Lord. This time her focus is not on Jacob. Her focus is not on herself. Her focus now is on the Lord. Therefore, she named this child Judah. Then she stopped bearing. And that's where we'll pick up next time. Next time we'll see just really how convoluted this mess really gets. So any comments or questions or anything you want to add on this lesson?
What does Judah mean?
Judah means praise.
Praise.
Mm-hmm. It's related. It's related to the word praise.
So it's a process there that she's gone through.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like it ends well.
Yeah. And then she stopped bearing. She will have other sons. She will, see, that's 4. She will have 2 more sons and she'll have a daughter. But this thing that happens next time is really interesting.
I've got Jacob's family here in my study, and he's had 12 kids altogether, and 12 sons and 1 daughter,
Yeah.
so 13.
Dinah, is that Dinah?
Yeah, on your in your lesson you should have that family tree too.
Okay.
This one right here.
Is the next one the stripe and the spot?
No, the next one is those mandrakes. They go out and gather the mandrakes.
Oh,
Reuben goes out and gathers the
yeah.
mandrakes.
Okay.
So We'll talk about
Give me some
what
of
that's supposed to do for you. So,
Give me some of them.
yeah. Get you some of
Says
that.
Rachel.
Yeah. Anything else? Any thoughts or questions?
It's excellent.
Well, thank you.
Excellent.
But it all depends on what you think about
The
Jacob.
way you
How you
presented
take
it like
this.
that.
Right.
I've never heard it put like the two ways that we could see Jacob.
Yeah.
Or 3 or 4.
Or 3 or 4. I mean, and it's the same way with everybody.
Yeah.
Well, I like to think that he has good intentions, because I like to think the best of everyone.
There you go. There you go. I don't know why J. Vernon McGee just despises him. I just love J. Vernon McGee, but
I know,
Yeah.
he loves everybody.
except Jacob and Sarah. So, all right. Well, let's pray. Father, we thank you for your word. We thank you for the opportunity to open it up and to discuss it and to see that these are real